I was hell on Earth. 15 to 22 million soldiers died in battle. Another 23 million were wounded. 6 to 13 million civilians are estimated to have perished. The war was called the War to End All Wars, although of course that name was far too optimistic. Only the Taiping Rebellion, World War II, and possibly the Manchu Conquest were more deadly. But from these dark depths of depravity came a remarkable event of human kindness. It was Christmas Eve in 1914, 5 months into the war. French and British soldiers were locked in trench warfare against their German counterparts. Pope Benedict requested a truce on Christmas from the warring governments, who adamantly refused. German Emperor William II sent Christmas trees to the front to bolster morale. German soldiers placed these trees outside their trenches and decorated them. The exact details of the truce's beginning are somewhat inconsistent. Really, the Christmas truce is less a singular event and more dozens of different squadrons all independently deciding to have a peaceful night. The most repeated story is as follows. On Christmas Eve, German soldiers began singing Silent Night. Their British enemies responded by singing the first Noel. Informal truces were called as 100,000 soldiers laid down their arms. Soldiers trekked into no man's land to exchange food, tobacco, alcohol, and souvenirs. The peace gave men an opportunity to retrieve the bodies of their fallen comrades and take them back for burial. Famously, soccer games were held between opposing soldiers. The truce was not universal. In one battlefield, a British private was shot in the head by a sniper for attempting to start a truce. One young German corporal railed against his fellow soldiers for daring to lay down their arms. His name was Adolf Hitler, whose lack of respect for human decency would become apparent with time. The Christmas truces lasted a few hours in some places and lasted until New Year's in others. Attempts of truces were attempted in later years, but no other widespread truce was ever held. The Christmas truce, as nice of a story as it is somewhat of an anomaly. Military commanders on both sides were disgusted by the truce and forbade it from ever happening again. It needs to be understood when talking about the Christmas truce that the soldiers did not realize how intense the war would grow. When the war began, they were told it would be over by the end of the year. The close trenches of the war forced soldiers to live closely with their enemies, making it harder to see enemy soldiers as anything but human. Small truces shouted over the trenches to give opportunities to retrieve wounded soldiers were common. In April of the next year, the German army began using chlorine gas, with their enemies quickly adopting the same tactics. The war grew into an endless bloody quagmire of constant battle. It's easy to treat your enemy as a person when the war has just begun. It's a lot harder to do so when your friends have been killed, when your lungs burn with mustard, when you have been fighting for years and don't think the battle will ever end. It is very useful for military commanders for their soldiers to see their enemies as inhuman. If your goal is to win a war, then you cannot have the men under your command sympathize with those they have been ordered to kill. Generals have a vested interest in their soldiers treating their enemies as savages who must be exterminated. This philosophy has led to unforgivable atrocities, but at least it has prevented another Christmas truce. World War I was not the end of war. The Christmas truce did not last, and those in power ensured it did not ever happen again. But for a quiet night in 1914, there was peace. A small break from the bloodshed, as snow fell on the battlefield, and men sang Silent Night. A soccer game played in the trenches, and gifts shared between enemies. And that's something that matters. Merry Christmas, Keokuk County. Peace on earth, and goodwill to all.